House Education Committee will come to order. Members will please take their seats. Clerk will open the roll and we will record our attendance on the electronic voting system. Well, maybe we'll, there we go.
Says I have to enter a password.
Mine's not working.
I'm here.
Chairman, are you here?
No, I'm not here, according to the electronic voting system. There we go. Okay, everybody, has everybody recorded their vote? For attendance? All right, clerk will close the roll. And we have a quorum. All right, at the speaker's request, I would entertain a motion to refer to the Committee on Courts of Justice, House Bill 1828, which is Delegate Eden Peppers, and I've spoken to him about that. So there's a motion and a second. Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor of referring House Bill 1828 to the Committee on Courts of Justice, please say aye. All those opposed, that bill is referred to the Committee on Courts of Justice. Next, we'll take up Delegate Massey's report from his subcommittee meeting last night.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had one bill last night, Mr. Chairman, House Bill 1780 by Delegate Plum. Delegate Plum is a member of the Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation Board, and this bill that he brought is at the request of the board. The Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation is trying to improve its income, and so they want to be able to lease their facilities and to lease particularly the ships. Apparently there's a lot of interest in the ships down there leasing those. They have worked diligently with the Coast Guard and all other stakeholders. They have a very detailed set of policies and procedures that they will be following, but the Attorney General told them that the current code did not allow them to lease their facilities. So this bill would take care of that. The current code says they may enter into contracts to further the purposes of the foundation. That's where it ends. I would have thought that was broad enough, but the Attorney General didn't think so. So then it goes on to say, the new bill says, including contracts for the use and rental of agency facilities, structures, spaces, and personal property under control of the foundation. So that's the bill, Mr. Chairman. It passed out of the subcommittee unanimously, and I would move to report the bill out of the Education Committee.
Second. All right, the motion and the second is to report House Bill 1780 as recommended by the Higher Education Subcommittee. Is there any member of the committee that has a question regarding the legislation? Is there any member of the audience that didn't speak in subcommittee that wishes to speak to the bill? All those in favor of reporting House Bill 1780, please record your vote on the electronic voting system. All members voted.
No, I'm trying, Mr. Chairman, I'm not getting very far.
All right. Has everybody voted now?
I'm trying.
Press it one time, Jeff.
You have to have a light touch, not a heavy touch.
Not my specialty, like I said.
All right. Everybody voted?
Not yet.
Wait a minute.
Delegate Tyler's a yes.
I'm a yes.
She's got hers. Mark's not here. Okay. All right. This is clerk will close the roll. That bill reports 20 to nothing. All right. That's all our subcommittee reports for this morning. In the queue, first up is Delegate Rob Bell with House Bill 1578. And committee members, we've heard this bill before, but we're going to hear it one more time.
Why not?
Members of the committee, good morning. Thank you for hearing the matter again. This is what we've been calling the Tebow bill, although we might at some point need a different name since Mr. Tebow has long since stopped playing, it seems. But the issue is what happens to high school age homeschoolers, and are they able to participate in activities at the local high school? Now, I always say this, I would encourage everybody to meet with their local homeschoolers. If you haven't done it in the last 5 or 10 years, you will find it's a very different arrangement than it was perhaps when homeschooling started. Many homeschoolers are fully integrated in some way into the local public schools. There are 64 school districts that allow them to take classes and or participate in extracurriculars. In my own homeschool district, they literally can walk in the door and take calculus and take chemistry. This idea that there's sort of a China wall between the two just no longer exists. What they can't do, even if the locality wants them to, is participate in inter-school competitions. Now, the most famous one, of course, is sports, but there's also a band competition, choir, rhetoric, debate. And they can't do it because of a VHSL rule that won't let them. This bill would create a local option that would allow each locality to make that decision, regardless of what the VHSL rules were. So that if Albemarle County wanted to do it, the homeschoolers could participate. If Greene County did, the homeschoolers couldn't. A couple of details, and then I'm happy to answer questions. The first is there's a list of requirements to make sure that this isn't used for cheating. The students have to be in the district, they have to be the right age, they can't be getting paid. This is not going to allow any more school shopping than regular students do. They have to live where the school would be. They have to be tested and passing the homeschool test for 2 years. This is to make sure you don't have someone drop out and the very next day walk in as a homeschooler and say, I'm here, you have to let me try out. Again, it's totally a local option. It sunsets after 5 years. And last, it only allows them to try out. There's no reserve slots or places. Every student that this applies to could walk in the school door, register, and apply for the teams. But their parents have decided that for this student, for this year, the right education is homeschooling. We're trying to say, let's not make them make this choice between, there's a kid is 17, he weighs 220 pounds, he's knocking around the house, he would love to play football, but he also should be homeschooled for his education. Mr. Chairman, you've seen the matter before. It's been amended by this, both the subcommittee and committee several times. This is the same as it was last year. It has a 5-year sunset, so we moved the sunset 1 year to keep it at 5 years. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions. There are numerous groups here to speak in opposition and in favor of it. Thank you.
Right. Any members have questions before we go to other speakers? Delegate Massey?
Delegate Bell, is the bill identical to last year's bill?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Delegate Bell. Let's take the proponents of the legislation first, and we're going to try to keep it to a 3-minute time limit for each speaker. And hopefully it'll be less than that, because we have heard this legislation, I don't know how many years, it's been a good number of years though. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know I'm grayer than when I started doing this. I'll just echo what Delegate Bell said. I also want to point out, this is a popular bill. Several years ago, the Commonwealth Education poll polled Virginians, and 67% of their respondents favor this inclusion. So this is, you know, the paradigm has changed as far as homeschooling and participation in public sports. So we would hope that you would support the bill.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Chris Friend of the Family Foundation has been a priority for several years. It's just a matter of providing some equality for homeschool students to have an opportunity to try it out. And we'd once again like to see this bill pass. Thank you.
And the Yellow Virginia Assembly of Independent Baptists also asking for your consideration, and our religious community do desire to have this option available. Thank you.
All right, are there any other proponents of the legislation that wish to speak? All right, let's go to the opponents that wish to speak.
Mr. Chairman, good morning. My name is Jim Livingston. I'm president of the Virginia Education Association. The VEA is opposed to this legislation. Public school students have to meet very specific requirements in order to participate in after-school athletic programs. We don't believe that this would provide a level playing field. And the issue then becomes if someone who is homeschooled tries out and is awarded a position on a team, then we've got a public school student somewhere who did not have the ability to play on that team. So for that reason, we are opposed to this bill. You know, in reality, we feel that it is an issue of priorities. Parents have a right to decide the best for their children. And for public school students, They are provided the opportunity to participate in school-sponsored after-school athletics. Parents for homeschoolers need to make a choice, and that is whether or not they wish their children to be homeschooled or they wish their children to participate in athletic programs. It's, in our opinion, that simple.
Mr. President, let me, before you leave the podium, let me welcome you to the Education Committee. I think this is the first time since you've taken over as president of the Virginia Education Association. We've had you before the committee, so I just want to say welcome and look forward to working with you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Dr. Long,
Good morning again.
how are you? Good.
Thank you all for having me here. Again, I'm Billy Hahn, Executive Director of Virginia High School League. Virginia High School League has convened a committee, as I mentioned, on Monday to look at the concept of students who receive home instruction participating in inter-school athletic activities or educational activities. We have 16 members in that committee who represent all 6 of the classifications across Virginia's public schools. To this point, we've done 2 things. We've compared the proposed bill to current VHSL eligibility requirements. And we've also collected questions and concerns from member schools about things that may not be addressed in the current bill. Concerns from the membership resolve around having commonality between homeschool and public school students. 2 of these concerns are students passing 5 classes and taking 5 classes, which is a VHSL requirement, and the level of rigor of the courses that students are taking in public schools. Since 1913, the Virginia High School League has had a focus on developing a system that creates a level playing field for Virginia public school students. Without homeschool students meeting the same academic standards, this balance would be disrupted and inequitable. The VHSL is a member-driven organization. As of now, the membership is not in favor of having students who receive homeschool instruction participating in public school interscholastic programs. But again, our committee is continuing its work as we move forward. Thank you.
Delegate Greason, did you have a question for Dr. Hahn?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Hahn, good to see you again. Thank you for coming back in front of us. There's an old adage here that says you're not supposed to ask a question unless you know what the answer is, and I don't know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So, is there any other instant that you know of where there is a non-elected body like the VHSL that has this kind of influence on decision-making within the 4 walls of the public school and within the community at large in deciding that the homeschooler should or shouldn't be able to participate? It seems strange to me that your entity is not elected by the citizens of the Commonwealth, but yet you wield quite a bit of power over what does or doesn't happen, where usually that power resides with an elected body that's accountable to those voters. And that's usually the fundamental problem that I have. To the question, do you know of any other entities that might have a similar situation that govern and make decisions over our students the way the VHSL does?
Delegate Greason, I think I'm like you. I'm not sure that I know the answer to that question just right offhand either, but I'll be glad to look at that and research that and do that. Again, I think the point that I would come back to is that while we are not in that elected position, we do represent the member schools. The VHSL staff itself, I don't make this decision, we don't make this decision, the staff in Charlottesville. It's driven by the principals of our schools, of our public schools who actually vote and make these decisions. So,
Thank you.
that's the best answer I can give you at this time.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith, I see you're next up.
Tom Smith, Superintendent's Association. We continue to be in opposition to this bill. Delegate Bell is right. There are homeschoolers who come in and take 2, 3, whatever courses in our public schools. The difference is in what this requirement is, they enroll in order to do that. If you look at states in this country that have solved this problem and have accepted homeschoolers to participate in this way, my understanding is from the states that I've heard back from, they enroll. The VSBA a couple of years back had a committee, included homeschool representatives and public school representatives to try to solve the problem. One of the big issues was the homeschool students did not want to enroll. Now, and so that is one of the major issues we have. And I will give you an example towards Delegate Greason's question in terms of not possibly public school students, although they do impact them. There is another private organization that operates in the Commonwealth that deals with public funded institutions that does not allow you to participate unless you enroll, and that's the NCAA. They do not allow anybody to walk off the field and come and play. You have to participate. You have to enroll in one of their participating institutions. So there is commonality there. We continue to oppose this bill. We are encouraged and we are pleased that the VHSL has set up a process to look at this. And the committee is going to address these issues, and we think that process needs to be able to play out. Thank you.
John. Delegate Linenfelter, do you have a question for
I
Mr.
do,
Smith?
Mr. Chairman. I want to be clear in the enrollment point that was raised. How many courses would a homeschool student have to enroll in order to meet the requirement to be able to participate in sports in a school?
I think that it could be that, and I'd have to go back and look at the specifics. I do know enrollment happens when you take one course, whether they would require, the pass 5, take 5, whether they could work something out on that, I don't know. But the key piece now is enrollment, because that brings that child under the same auspices of the school board as any other student who would want to play.
Well, Tom, let me ask you this question, Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Delegate Linenfelter.
So let us assume that there was a course in sports health in a school that a homeschooler would enroll in, and then wouldn't that student be able to participate in sports at that point?
Depends on whether or not the requirement was an academic course or not. And I can't answer that question, haven't been involved in that hard right now.
So, Mr. Chairman?
Delegate Linenfelter.
So you're not sure whether or not it would be considered academic or not?
No.
Okay, so it seems to me, Mr. Chairman, I've just made this observation, that Delegate Bell is correct that this is a fairly low bar that's out there now. And it seems to me that it's almost artificially low. And so I support the bill.
Delegate Cole, did you have a question for Mr. Smith?
Yes, I do.
All right.
Delegate Cole.
Yeah, I was just wondering, are you aware, do homeschool parents, do they get any tax breaks or anything on when they choose not to utilize the services of the government schools?
Not phenomenal.
Okay, and follow-up?
Delegate Cole.
So do you think it's fair that they should have to pay the freight for all these extracurricular activities offered by the schools and then not be able to access them?
Two parts to that. When you pay taxes, you get benefit from a number of things. You may not take, you may pay taxes towards something you may not get, an obvious one-on-one benefit for, whether that is all parts of local government, including the public schools. The other piece is that often these athletic programs can be self-sufficient in how they're run. They will get, you'll pay the coach, and you may have some monies that go towards equipment, but they're also require, because of attendance and admission charges, they get monies in other ways that may not come out of the general budget. That depends on school division to school division and how that's happened.
Delegate Robinson, did you have a question for Mr. Smith?
Mr. Chairman, my question is actually for Dr. Hahn.
Okay. Dr. Hahn, can you come back up while Delegate Robinson has that on her mind?
Good morning. The other day when you did your presentation before us, you said that you gave us some numbers of like 192,000 students across the Commonwealth. And then you gave us some other numbers related, and I apologize, I wrote them down in my papers upstairs on my desk. But there were some other numbers there, 190,000, how many participated in the activities that you had listed? And then and then my question would be, if we take that number of homeschool students and spread it out across the entire Commonwealth, with those mixed in with those 190,000 students and whatever the number was participating. And of course, this only applies to high school, not your elementary homeschool kids, so you eliminate them out of the number. how many homeschool kids would actually be impacting any school and any particular sport across this Commonwealth?
That's good. I've got those numbers, but again, they're on my desk as well. I don't have those numbers, but I do have the numbers that actually I received from DOE of the number of 9 through 12 homeschool students in each district. So I do have those. I'll be glad to share those with you. I don't have them on hand right now, but your memory was actually 197,000 actually. But I will be glad to get those numbers and get them back to you. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
All right, I see we've got at least one or two more speakers.
Good morning, Barry Weinstein with Fairfax Hampton Norfolk Federation of Teachers, 6,668 members of those 3 school districts. I simply, for brevity, will associate my comments with this side of the issue, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pat Lacey with the School Boards Association, that's a very dangerous thing to do.
Mr. Lacey, it's always good to have you here with us.
We've appeared historically on this bill, and you know our position is we're opposed to it. We think that participation should be limited to students who are enrolled in the public schools. Let me say this to Delegate Greason and answer your question. Your question is a very good question. I think Delegate Lingenfelter has a bill in, or a study resolution in to study the Virginia High School League.
I think it's Delegate Bell.
Delegate Bell, I'm sorry. Oh, Delegate Bell, and so I would suggest to you that some of the questions that you may have and some of the questions other members may have could be answered by Delegate Bell's study if it's passed. Thank you.
Delegate Cole, did you have a question for Mr. Lacey?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, you understand that the bill would simply give the authority to make the decision to the local school board, correct?
You know, to allow anybody to play.
The way the bill is written, it would not require schools to allow homeschoolers to participate. It would just empower the local school board to make that decision. And I always thought you supported giving school boards additional authority.
I am in full support, Delegate Cole, of local control, as are you. And that's the reason why my position, as I stated when I came up here, is that we think that participation should be limited to public school students. And as long as the school boards can say that, we're fine with it. I think that answers your question.
So you're supporting the legislation?
No, I'm not saying I support the legislation. But you understand our position, you're entirely correct. I would also say to you that there are lots of services my tax dollars pay for that I don't get to participate in, and some for which I don't want to participate in, such as the prison system.
All right, Delegate Bell, did you have a question for Mr. Lacey?
I don't know that this is specifically for Mr. Lacey, but maybe for Dr. Hahn, but Mr. Chairman, I would be remiss while Mr. Lacey is at the podium if I didn't bring up the subject of virtual education. Now that we have a full-time pilot program where a student can be enrolled in virtual education for their entire curriculum, and I'm wondering, are those students then eligible to participate in the extracurricular activities?
And while Dr. Hahn was coming up to respond to that as for on behalf of the Virginia High School League, I've talked to Delegate Bell, and I believe that when you're enrolled in the public school virtual school program, you are one of our students, and so therefore you're entitled to all the rights and privileges that are intended to being a student, enrolled student. So that I hope that's a direct answer to your question.
Dr. Hahn, do you want to respond as well?
Absolutely. This committee made a good point on Monday about virtual school students. We actually had a staff meeting yesterday, spent well over an hour just on that topic itself. There's a strategic planning meeting going on in Marion, Virginia this morning, and VHL staff has that on the agenda to give feedback because I think that's a really good point, because virtual students that are enrolled through our public schools should be eligible in some way or some fashion. So yes, we are looking to see where are rules on that, what we would need to do to look at that piece and provide that information to the executive committee and the membership to make a decision on.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. I think our last speaker, and the VEA has spoken once, but you're going to wrap it up.
I'm actually Kathy Bertrand. While I am with the VEA, I'm here to speak as the mom of a high school student athlete in Henrico County. And I just wanted to address any sense at all that there's a low bar for our student athletes. My son is taking 3 AP courses, an honors engineering course. He is dismissed from school at 4:05, goes directly to practice, gets home at about 6:15, where we quickly have dinner, and then he goes to his room to complete his homework. He is on a path towards graduation, taking rigorous courses, and the requirements for graduation require our public school students to take a rigorous academic program. So I just wanted to make sure we clarified any sense of a low bar.
Delegate Lingenfeld.
Mr. Chairman, just hang on. So I can clarify, Mr. Chairman, what I meant by low bar. I'm not talking about the students. That's a misinterpretation. What I'm talking about is the process by which you surmount the point that was made that you have to be enrolled. And I think that's the point I'm trying to make to you, and I think you misinterpreted what I meant.
And if I did, I apologize. I appreciate your clarification.
All right. I don't see any other speakers. Do members of the committee have any other questions for Delegate Bell? Delegate Breeson.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I was waiting until I had an opportunity to address the patron. If he could join. Delegate Bell, once again, I thank you for bringing this bill forward. Been a co-sponsor and supporter of this. What I find interesting, Delegate Bell, this year, for 5 or 6 years in a row, every speaker said the same thing: take 5, pass 5. I didn't hear that term once this morning, not a single time. Not one speaker stood up and said, take 5, pass 5. What I heard was, you have to be enrolled. So it seems to me that, as you stated, right now you could enroll in one single class in the public school, and then you could participate in the competitive activity. Is that correct? Because I did not hear that in any of the testimony today. I wanted to know if there was a change that I missed.
And I think all of us have been sort of respectful of your time and knowing that almost everyone on this panel has heard this multiple times. Did not retread water, but I believe it's still a pass 5, take 5.
Yes, and I did mention that. That rule still applies.
The VHSL requirement. And again, there are counties right now who wish to allow homeschoolers to participate. The list changes every year, but there are counties who said, if you would let us, we would let them play. Now, to answer the question on local control, yes, those homeschool students on away games would let their feet touch the precious turf of the county that didn't want a homeschooler and said, but I mean, unless they were going to forfeit the games, that's how this would work. And yes, it's a minority group. It's 6,000. Not all of them would want to participate. So when somebody asks about the number, that's 6,000 roughly high school age homeschool students. God knows how many would actually want to try out, and of those, how many would actually make the team. It's a very small group, so this is not a group that has huge political power. In the last 4 years, we've had a whole generation of those kids go through high school, not able to try out for the teams, and they've come and gone, but their younger siblings or their neighbors' kids would like to get in. So, Mr. Chairman, I would ask the committee for a favorable recommendation.
Sure.
All right, Delegate Lingenfelter.
Chairman, have a motion.
All right, Delegate Lingenfelter.
I move that we report the bill.
There's a motion to report, and I've heard a second to report House Bill 1578. All right, we've had discussion. Any other members have any questions or discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of reporting House Bill 1578, please record your vote on the electronic voting system.
Hi, Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me?
I'm trying.
Okay. Light touch, Delegate Massey. Light touch.
It was homeschooling, you figure.
I'll get you.
All right. There we go. The clerk will close the roll. That bill report is 14-7.
Thank you.
Delegate Bell. All right, Delegate Lingenfelter, we have House Bill 1392. You're next in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think every member should have a copy of this summary that handed out. Is there a member who is not? This is just for the audience. This is last year's summary versus this year's summary. Mr. Chairman, I was intrigued by Mr. Lacy's comments about full support of local control. You might call this bill the full support of local control for school security bill of 2017. Because that's exactly what this bill does. It is completely local option. And I'm just going to take you through it and make a few comments about how this varies from the bill that we passed out of this body last year. This bill essentially authorizes a school security officer to carry a firearm in the performance of his duties if he meets the following criteria. First, he has to be a retired law enforcement officer who retired or resigned or left the force in good standing, something that is determined on retirement. That's fairly easy to determine. Secondly, he has to have met the additional training and certification requirements of the Department of Criminal Justice Services, DCJS, which they will be required in this bill to develop. The third point is the local school board will solicit input, Mr. Chairman, from the CLEO, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the locality, regarding the qualifications of that potential SSO that would be hired by the locality. And I would just footnote that